Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're back from the dead, essentially, seriously, pretty low. We are going to talk about why I took such a big hiatus off in terms of episodes being recorded. But before we do that, as usual, I have to figure out how to, as usual, I have to grab the link from my YouTube account of this podcast and use it to post to my Twitter account. Luckily, hiatus off in terms of... There we go. Wow, man, we got another subscriber while I was gone. I'm not gonna lie, guys. What happened that kept me from being on the podcast was pretty terrible for me personally, but we will power through. Hashtag NFL, hashtag football. Anyway, I wish I had more time to actually do like the correct hashtags and shit like that, but unfortunate for them and everybody else involved, I have an entire podcast to do, and I'm hanging out with you while I'm doing it. So let's copy and paste. We're gonna send this tweet, and then we're gonna send it from my main account, my primary account here, which, by the way, if you are interested in following, is FB_playbook. Follow that there. I promise the audio will get better, because in my headphones it sounds like the music is louder than my voice, but I can't tell because my sound balancing is a little wonky. You can tell I'm in a completely different place than I was a while ago, and that's pretty awesome, because we're gonna talk about that too. So we're gonna talk about why I'm in a weird place that you've never seen me in before. And I don't think I'm able to log into my Facebook account on this PC, but I had to spend an entire hour formatting my PC to try and figure it out or whatever, but we powered through. Something went wrong. All right, man, let's hit post again, and hopefully it goes through. All right, cool, man. Anyway, let's talk about football, because that's what we're here to do. That's what this whole show is about. That's what it is for me personally, man. Anyway, I got a bunch of shit that I need to get. All right, yeah, we're not logged into Facebook here. All right, we're just going to start the show like a normal person would. If you got any questions or thoughts or anything like that, you're more than welcome to type them into the chat as the show goes on. Even if you have comments that, even if you have comments that you want to bring up throughout the course of the show, I will be responding to it after the fact as well, especially if I see it, which I should, because I have my YouTube account connected to this. Anyway, let's take it from the top. This show is going to be a lot less of my notes like I did when there was game by game breakdowns throughout the course of the week, and a lot more of, we're trying to get this show in under an hour, so that if you have no idea what the fuck is going on going into this upcoming weekend for the championship weekend, for the AFC and the NFC championship weekend, you'll understand everything that's been going down. I have a couple of stories that I want to talk about that were NFL wise, and then we're going to talk about the actual games that went down, because I think I have them posted. I have them copied somewhere to be able to talk about it, but we'll see. Let me put this in here for a second, and then we're going to talk about some that really fucking sucked that happened. Anyway, so as some of you who are returning listeners, because we did gain a subscriber while I was not listening, or while I wasn't posting on the show, which is, I think, a testament to the quality of the show. Shout out. We're almost at 40 subscribers, and honestly, you can't get to 100,000. You can't get to 1 million without getting to 40. You know what I mean? So we're working on that overall. The thing to really point out and really take away from everything that was going. Anyway, sorry. New environment, new experiences. I'm no longer podcasting out of my bedroom. I'm podcasting out of what is my uncle's. He calls it a man cave, but he built a bar next to his house, but you know, everything's free, which is my kind of bar, honestly. Anyway, so he told me I should start recording here because he wants his podcast to blow up and do a lot better. I also obviously want it to be like a full-time job for me, and this is just free space for me to work in and be creative in. I'm not bothering him. I'm not bothering anyone. The only inconvenience is the 45-minute drive from my house to this place. Other than that, I'm good. So as you can see, there's a bunch of different jerseys throughout the entire place. My uncle is a Steelers fan. I am not a Steelers fan. Obviously, I'm wearing my Seahawks hoodie. And for those of you who've watched the show for a long time, know I'm from Houston, and I'm from Houston, and I am a Texans and Seahawks fan. Whatever. There is one absolutely insane fucking jersey that is in this building right now, and it is there's a OJ Simpson jersey slightly to my left right now, and I had to like frame it out to make sure it doesn't show up on this stream because, you know, my uncle, he's an older black man than myself, so he grew up in a time where OJ Simpson wasn't a very clear domestic abuser and murderer. Anyway, me on the other hand, I'm lucky enough that I didn't grow up in a time where your opinion on OJ Simpson was man, what is the word that I'm looking for? It is a condemnation of all black people, because essentially that's what it was during that time period. And I've come to grow to learn that piece of information, despite knowing that OJ Simpson 100% allegedly did what he was accused of doing. He's no longer with us, which some people would definitely call a massive win. I don't pray for the dead unless they're absolutely huge. You know what? We don't need to get into that. Speaking of dead people, the reason I didn't do my podcast is because one of my close friends passed away about 2 days before Christmas, and it really fucked me up, obviously. And I want to take some time. That was a horrible lead into this because Snowman meant a lot to me as a person. He's a person I talk to every day for about 8 years or whatever. And he always extended kindness to me as a human being. I cared about him. He cared about me. And if there were more people like Snowman, this world would be a lot better place. And like I said, it's a bar where everything is free. It's my kind of bar. I had to drink 1 or 2 of these before the show started to be even able to talk about my friend and for a long period of time. And I'll tell you this, is like a guy, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a large black man. A lot of it due to hamburgers or a lot of it due to cheeseburgers and pizza, but also I do lift weights. Some people have taken note of that on my Instagram at the Ashton Forever. I do lift weights and I do run. I don't run very fast or lift a lot of heavy weights. I think my max squat is like a 375, which is really bad for a person that's my weight, because I think it's slightly over my actual full body weight. But going back to the reason why that's important, you know, a lot of people would assume that I'm a tough guy, and I'm not. I care about my friends. I love my girlfriend. I love my family, and I'm lucky enough to have a family that is worth loving. I know other people are not as lucky as myself, but nonetheless, I have a lot of emotions, and if it makes me soft to cry when my friend passes away, then maybe it ain't worth being tough. Maybe it ain't worth being hard. Anyway, I just couldn't believe it for a long period of time. He was around my age. He was like 35. And I just couldn't believe it for a long period of time. And then we walked into the funeral home for his funeral that I was late for. Luckily, my friend who set up the funeral told me about like a false time, knowing that I was going to be late. And I showed up right on time when the service started, which is I'm really grateful for, because if I had to sit in that room and look at my friend's body for about 30 minutes before the service started, I probably would have cried a lot more than I actually did when I walked in, because they had a photo of him when he walked in, and then I realized it was real. I cried at another one of my friends' house when I was walking their dogs while they were out of town, and cried a little bit after at the karaoke bar when we went to go sing, because that was one of his favorite things to do in the world. So shout out Snowman. I appreciate the short time that I knew you, my brother. And I don't know what's on the other side, but I do appreciate, I hope it's something good for you. You know what I mean? So there we go. Anyway, let's talk about football. I know that pales in comparison to what the fuck I just said, but I've had like a month and a half to get over the fact that he's gone, and I probably never will, but I am able to talk about it now, which is a first. Anyway, Let's talk about football from the top, man. We got more death stuff, which is different, though. This one, apparently, this is like from a Washington Post article. The FBI is investigating the death of Jim Irsay and the doctor that was reportedly supplying him with huge amounts of opioids and ketamine injections. I will say this. Jim Irsay has a history of drug abuse that from everything that we knew, he had been fighting pretty hard. But I would imagine if you, when you get older, you become a person that's in pain on a constant basis. And I don't know what kind of pain Jim Irsay was in, but I never saw a photo of him when he wasn't wearing orthopedic shoes that you see, orthopedic non-slip shoes, which I have to imagine is some kind of indicator of the level of pain that he was in on a regular basis. And obviously opioids have absolutely wrecked America as a whole in terms of what people, how people interact with them, addiction, destruction, selling it, all that kind of stuff like that. And so it wouldn't surprise me that a very rich man who's been rich his entire life would have struggles keeping away from them, mainly because he could probably be found in the ditch somewhere alive and still be able to wake up the next day and buy more of the stuff that was harming him. So I'm sure Jim Irsay put up a really good fight, but at the end of the day, pain gets to us all. Shout out to Jim Irsay, RIP to him. I don't know what I would expect from this situation. If their implication is that Jim Irsay was drugged up so bad by a private doctor that he ended up passing away because of that, that would suck ass, obviously. But, I just thought it was interesting just because, we spent a long time understanding that Jim Irsay had his struggles with opioids and didn't know ketamine, but I'm assuming other drugs as well, because ketamine's like on the rise in terms of popularity overall. But yeah, that's it. They also signed his death certificate saying that he passed away from natural causes. So if it was due to an overdose from one of those substances, that is pretty major. Also have to wonder who's filing this lawsuit. I guess that would have to be his sisters or something like that. Anyway, that was just an interesting story that I saw right before I started the podcast, so I want to talk about it at the top. The other thing, Robert Saleh has been officially named the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, and I've been talking about the Titans all season. I've watched every single game that they've played, and watched every single game that they have played, and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I've watched every single game that they played, and I went to the number one Titans consultant that I know of. That's my friend Richie. He's a massive Titans fan, has been for, I want to say, like 15 years, and this is his official thoughts on Robert Saleh. He said, I feel like Denard Wilson was getting the most out of the defense, considering the injuries and a lack of talent. I like Saleh, but the improvement really has to be on the other side of the ball. So the offensive coordinator is key. Really wanted McDaniels, and praying we don't get Nagy. If you're not familiar, Matt Nagy, former Chicago Bears head coach, and legitimately the absolute nightmare for a lot of people. We will talk about what happened to Mike McDaniels. Unfortunately, he will not be going to the Tennessee Titans. I don't think Matt Nagy's on the radar for the Titans overall, but maybe there's been reports about how he went to go show up for an interview, which would be super weird. I will also say former Chicago Bears head coach Matt Eberflus, who, if the playoffs and this season have shown anything, is that Matt Eberflus was in way over his head when it came to the head coaching position. So anyway, I honestly, if you see how this season panned out and you have Matt Eberflus as a coach on your team, you have to wonder, does this guy know what the fuck he's doing? Anyway, off top, I kind of agree with Richie on a lot of stuff in terms of the Tennessee Titans. Robert Saleh, who is the former defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, is officially the Tennessee Titans head coach. Robert Saleh was formerly the Jets head coach. And honestly, you can't hold it against anybody when they go to the Jets and they don't succeed, because the Jets act actively sabotage themselves on a pretty regular basis for whatever reason. Probably the product of too big to fail in the case of Woody Johnson, who is a part of a long line of people who apparently name themselves after dick jokes, which is really weird. Whatever. And also pick players based off Madden ratings. You know what I mean? You can't really trust an organization that's led like that. But Robert Saleh as a head coach will be extremely interesting to me personally. With a fair shake, with a team that's actually trying to get talent, with a team that has potential at the quarterback position. Because when he was with the Jets, they talked about like Sam Darnold and stuff like that. But if there's ever a tale that's as old as time, is that I used to be the big time hope quarterback for this one team, and then I sucked, and then I went to another team and I started to succeed. Like super old story. Anyway, Robert Saleh has the right mentality, because at the end of the day, I personally believe that building a team is about infrastructure, not about an individual player being a superstar, right? I believe that quarterbacks succeed because of all the talent around them, not necessarily because of the talent of the quarterback individually, right? And I think you're in a better position when you're a team that focuses on building an infrastructure, a quality of team that, regardless of the quarterback, is good, right? Put yourself in a position where you're one draft pick away or one free agency deal away from being a real Super Bowl contender, as opposed to being a team that drafts a random superstar quarterback, and now you're in this. You spend all your time tanking and tearing it down, trying to draft a superstar quarterback, and wasting all your time trying to find that, as opposed to actually building a good football team. Then again, I think that would make me like Mike Tomlin, and who got fired. So 20 years later, right, after having another winning season and going to another playoffs. Whatever. The Tennessee Titans get Robert Saleh. He goes out there. I got a lot of faith in Robert, just because I'm always a big proponent of not only black and brown people succeeding, but on top of that, defensive guys succeeding, especially in a league that likes to tell itself that it's all about offense, that likes to tell itself that it's all about scoring. But as you can tell throughout the course of this playoffs, it comes down to being able to get stops and generate turnovers, right? That's what this whole the narrative of this entire playoffs is about, defense. Whatever. Moving on. John Harbaugh, after the Ravens' loss in the essentially a playoff game against the Steelers to see who would win the AFC North, where the Steelers went on to get dismantled by the Houston Texans in the second half, and they sent Mike Tomlin home. They sent John Harbaugh home a couple days after Black Monday, which, if you're new to sports in general or you're new to football, Black Monday is the Monday after the final Sunday of the season. It's typically where all the coaches that are associated with, it's where vast majority of the head coaches get fired. In particular, the coaches that really haven't made a name for themselves, that don't have like a long tenure or anything like that. If you had an absolute dog shit season, you got fired on Black Monday. Moving on, John Harbaugh gets fired from the Ravens. That's in the past now. John Harbaugh, one of the greatest coaches in the history of the Baltimore Ravens, always kept them in contention, has an MVP level quarterback that he was not able to maximize the abilities of, which we can talk about Sean McDermott a little bit later on, you know what I mean? But very similar results for two players that have very similar paths in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, right? But John Harbaugh gets fired. He is now signed with the Giants, which I find to be fucking weird, to be honest with you, man. A lot of people have been talking about John Harbaugh's age. I have a bigger emphasis and a bigger concern about how the Giants historically are when it comes to team building. They have retained the same general manager that was questioning that basically told us that Saquon Barkley sucked ass right before he rushed for a 2,000-yard season, which, in case you're new to football, it's very, very good. There's only like 4 dudes ever who have ever had 2,000 rushing yards in a single season, and Saquon Barkley did it last year. Derrick Henry also did it last year. But they say the fish rots from the top or rots from the head, and you can talk about John Harbaugh in terms of what he's capable of doing, what kind of abilities he is going to have in terms of like leading the team and controlling the team and stuff like that. We don't know. Right? We don't have a full grasp because the draft hasn't happened. The draft process has not been happening. And you have to imagine the guy who's got more tenure, the guy's had more time to rub against John Mara and sit in the box and talk to him throughout the course of the season. The guy who is able to survive cutting Saquon Barkley, telling the owner that he wasn't that fucking good, and then having him go to the Eagles in the division and then have a prolific season and win a Super Bowl is a massive piece of why they won the Super Bowl. If you're able to survive that kind of shit, you've got the guy who's your boss wrapped around your finger. There's no other way to like actually perceive it other than that. But only time will tell in terms of like who's going to be the guy that's in charge. We've seen guys like Mike Mayock when he was the general manager for the Raiders, and he had a separate draft board from John Gruden when he was the head coach of the Raiders, and how that conflict basically tore that team apart and prevented them from being able to get actual like legit talent and stuff like that. Although it was super entertaining when Antonio Brown was like, came in on a hot air balloon and then burned his feet in a crowd. Man, it's going to be crazy when they make the 30 for 30 about Antonio Brown. Anyway, but yeah, man, John Harbaugh's in an interesting situation. He's got a GM that probably shouldn't be there, to be honest with you. Despite the fact that there's a lot of other talent on the team, like they traded for what was supposed to be one of the best defensive lines in the NFL, and it didn't happen. Yeah, man, John Harbaugh, new job instantaneously, which is not a surprise. Tenured, experienced, very intelligent head coach, long legacy of head coaching to success, and then a guy who also believes in building a team that's not completely centered around a singular quarterback being successful, which will be good for Jackson Dart, because in theory, right now, as we sit here right now, we think Jackson Dart is the guy for the Giants, despite his penchant to destroy himself. Raheem Morris got fired from the Atlanta Falcons head coaching job, which I thought was interesting considering this is like the second year in a... I mean, basically... Oh, wow. That was kind of scary for a second. Anyway, there's a mysterious like water purging sound. I'm not used to being in this environment. But anyway, going back to, Michael Penix Jr., a lot of people seem like they're out on him being the starting quarterback despite all the progress and ability that we saw throughout the course of the season. And I just want to say, being the person who immediately tried to tell you that a quarterback sucks when they haven't even played like a full season and a half or 2 seasons worth of actual NFL games, there's not much to gain from that. And I hate to be the person that sits on the fence, but I see more positive out of Michael Penix than I do negative in terms of being a quarterback outside of the injury situation, right? But Raheem Morris gets fired. That sucks. The Falcons basically assembled the best defense that they've had in like 30 years. They have like the second most sacks in Falcons history this past season, and Stefanski, who is fired from the Cleveland Browns, is now sliding in to become the Falcons head coach, which is interesting on a lot of levels. Baker Mayfield quote tweeted something that Stefanski said that a journalist tweeted out and said he's still waiting on that phone call from Stefanski and called him a snake. I will say this. If I'm Baker, well, one, you guys know how Baker Mayfield is. If you don't know how Baker is a guy who is like of normal height and exceptional talent that treats himself as if he is like 5'6", 5'4" kind of situation, right? Like he has short man syndrome, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with short dudes or whatever, but short dudes have like a certain personality that consistently permeates through, regardless of where you are in the world. That is something that consistently happens when you interact with short dudes. But Baker Mayfield treats himself like he's a short guy, and he's really not. I think me and Baker Mayfield are like the same height. He's obviously like 200 pounds lighter than me. But whatever. Baker quote tweeted, called Stefanski a snake because, he was a part of throwing Baker Mayfield away like garbage, which is what he said. So, and don't forget, Baker Mayfield essentially is the best Browns quarterback they've had in like 30 years. Since like Bernie Kosar, there hasn't been a better Browns quarterback since Baker Mayfield. And then, of course, this is once again why we talk about the difference between the Titans and the Jets, right? The Titans are an organization that I've seen succeed consistently, have good ideas, a team that organizes themselves and is actually trying to win football games for the most part. Whereas the Jets do shit like the Browns do. They get good players and they're like, we're too good for that guy. We're too good for that guy. And then that guy goes somewhere else and he balls out of control. So Garrett Wilson, if history shows anything, you should be trying to escape as soon as possible, my man. Whatever. Raheem Morris is out. Kevin Stefanski is in as the Falcons head coach, which will be interesting in terms of like the draft positioning that they have coming up, because the Falcons were technically tied for the NFC South lead going into. They were tied for the NFC South lead, but lost a bunch of the tiebreakers, or else they would have been a playoff team. I think it was like one game that it came down to in like week 2 when they got skunked by the Carolina Panthers, and they would have had a legit chance of being a playoff team despite how the back half of their season went, where they had their backup quarterback Kirk Cousins starting. So that was fun for everyone, I'm sure. Being in a situation that they probably didn't want to be in, and that is being competitive. So that's it. Kevin Stefanski, new guy in charge. Baker Mayfield, not too happy about it. I'm sure he's going to be really excited to play the Falcons this upcoming year. Brian Flores is the premier head coaching candidate until about like maybe 2 days ago. He signed an extension with the Minnesota Vikings. If you guys are unfamiliar, Brian Flores went from head coach of the Miami Dolphins, guy who said that Tua was not the kind of guy you need to be hanging your career on, was not a big believer, despite some of the stuff that we saw from Tua at the time where he looked like he was successful and able to really overcome the fact that he had a terrible offensive line. But ever since then, Tua's kind of been proving Brian right. Brian Flores, now going from the Pittsburgh Steelers as like an assistant to the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, and then having one of the best defenses despite having an offense that would choose whether or not it would score a touchdown every once in a while in the NFL, and was one of the premier head coaching candidates coming out of this cycle, which is really difficult to pull off when you're a defensive coordinator not attached to like a high-profile offense. And Brian Flores decided he was going to stick with the Vikings. I don't know if that means that he feels like there's a path to where KOC, who's Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Vikings, gets fired and then he becomes the head coach, or if he's waiting for another job to open up, or if Brian Flores is getting paid at the same rate that a head coach would be to only coach defense. And he has a lot of faith in his players overall, which I would, if I had Alex Van Ginkel, I have a lot of faith in him too. Jesse Minter is the new Ravens head coach. If you've never heard that name before, don't worry. I'm here to tell you he's the former offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers. So all the success that you saw, despite them losing one all-pro tackle for sure, and maybe another borderline all-pro tackle in Joe Alt, they had a lot of success offensively despite all that, and making the playoffs too. So that was fun for everyone, I'm sure. So Jesse Minter, new Ravens head coach, which is the typical path that a lot of teams go on if you're new to football in general. If you are with a team that has a ton, that has a defensive coordinator, a former defensive coordinator as their head coach, typically the next hire is going to be an OC. And sometimes that is the case. This is like carbon copy. Jesse Minter is the new Ravens head coach. And then Mike McDaniels is the new Chargers offensive coordinator, which is going to be huge because there's going to be, look, man, Jim Harbaugh, Mike McDaniel, they both believe in running the ball. And I think that we can all sit here and say, despite what we saw from the offensive line situation, the Chargers are in a prime position to be a good running team. Omari and Hampton and then Vidal looked amazing throughout the course of this season. And we all know that we live in a time now in the year 2026 and 2025. You can't be a team that's like, we have one running back that we run. They have two starting caliber running backs that they had, and they got a legit chance to see both of them dominate throughout the course of the season. And Mike McDaniel, big believer in the run. He was the run game coordinator for Kyle Shanahan for a long time at multiple stops, and now he's become, he was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, who honestly had one of the better offenses for a good chunk of time when they had Tyreek Hill and a bunch of other ridiculously talented players. And like I said before, you have that shift from like if you had an OC as a head coach, you have a DC as your next head coach. The Miami Dolphins' next head coach is Jeff Hafley, who is the former defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers, who honestly fell apart in the back half of this season, but we don't need to talk about that. They fell apart as an organization defensively in the back half of this season. A lot of that due to the fact that the offensive half of the ball kind of fell apart. The Chiefs have a new selection at offensive coordinator, and it is a guy we have known for a little while. His name is Eric Bieniemy. He was the former Chiefs offensive coordinator back in the day, and there was this the story with Eric Bieniemy is he was the OC, but he wasn't the play caller allegedly for the Kansas City Chiefs for a long time. Then he got his chance to go out there and try. He wanted a legitimate shot at being a head coach, and a lot of other people were like, well, if any other offensive coordinator got the kind of results that they got with Patrick Mahomes or an offense like that, they'd be a head coach without question. And Eric Bieniemy allegedly is really terrible in interviews. Don't know if that's truly the case. And then he bounced around a little bit because he kind of flamed out and ended up getting fired. Now he's back with the Kansas City Chiefs, and who knows what version of their offense they're going to be able to run with this. But the original sauce is back in the mix. That's what you take out of this. So you have to wonder, because there is a good mix of guys who used to be head coaches getting another head coaching job, which doesn't happen all that often. There's usually a push for newer, fresher faces and stuff like that. That's how Sean McVay ended up in his position, because there was a push for fresh faces with new ideas and revolutionizing football. And Eric Bieniemy, apparently, Andy Reid thought he was a big enough part of the play calling and the offensive setup situation that he's back in charge, right? The Bills fired Sean McDermott. We talked about how there's some parallels between John Harbaugh and Sean McDermott to a certain degree, two exceptional quarterbacks who had MVP caliber seasons, and were kind of let down by some of the other parts of their team. In the case of the Ravens, it was the wide receiver core. That's what I believe. But in the case of the Bills, it is having an unbalanced team. Like, their defense was, and I wouldn't even say the secondary. Really what it came down to is they really struggled to actually get pressure and generate pressure on quarterbacks throughout the course of the season, and it sets their defensive backs up for failure, because a lot of NFL quarterbacks, you give them 5 seconds in the pocket, you give them 4 seconds in the pocket, and they're going to be successful when it's all said and done. You're unable to get off blocks when people are running, your opponent is going to be successful. Anyway, they fired Sean McDermott. The guys in the mix right now are allegedly Joe Brady, Clint Kubiak, and Brian Daboll, who's the former offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, and then he went to the Giants to become the head coach. It didn't work out there. Now he's back in the mix of being the head coach for the Bills, which would be kind of crazy overall. But having Brian Daboll be in the mix for the Bills head coaching job screams a lot of desperation. It screams, man, we got to get back to the way it was when we were like real contenders. And what it really comes down to is, and this is very eerily similar to what's happening with the Chiefs and a little bit what's happening with the Ravens as well, superstar quarterback prevents you from having the bad season that you need to be able to get to the top tier talent on whatever side of the ball you're trying to target. And it's hard for me to believe that a lot of these teams are bad enough at assessing talent that they can't find guys to fill and dominate the roles in the defensive half of the ball, right? Despite having the overall lower draft picks throughout the course of the years. And that's what made the Patriots so exceptional, regardless of where they ended up, which a lot of the times it was around the 30s and the lower 20s. They were still able to go out there and mine out the talent, find the talent that would be able to take them to the next level. And with the Bills, with the Ravens, and I say that with the Ravens, but like the Ravens been able to get high-level talent as well, just on the defensive side of the ball. The struggle has been the offensive side, right? They lost Marshall Yanda. They have not been able to fill that growth. They had Rosengarden, who became the center and stuff like that. But the offensive line play, the Bills put a lot of emphasis on that, and they found themselves in a position where they have an offensive line that is more than competent in competition for top 5 in the league. But the other issue is what's happening on the other side of the ball, right? Like, there's just not enough of elite level talent when you're picking at the bottom, when you're picking last almost every single round, which is what the Bills have been doing for basically 7 years. It's what the Ravens have been. The Ravens have been picking at the bottom of the draft for a long time. And when Ozzie Newsome was in charge, it was a lot easier for them. He's still a consultant. Ozzie Newsome, former Alabama tight end, legendary football player, should be going to the Hall of Fame twice, honestly, for what he's been able to do at the GM position and as a player. But he's already in the Hall of Fame as a player. But nonetheless, it is insane to see the kind of stuff that has gone on. It looks like a major shift that is happening for the league overall. But also there's a lot of familiar faces still in the mix for some of these top jobs, right? The Arizona Cardinals are still looking for a head coach. They fired Jonathan Gannon, who is the former offensive coordinator for the Eagles. They're still searching. They got Chris Shula in the mix as well, and apparently Vance Joseph, which, if you don't remember Vance Joseph, he was the former he's the former head coach of the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken. And then the Cleveland Browns are still looking for a new head coach as well. Don't know who's signing up to intentionally tank for a second year in a row, because that is part of the tanking process. You can't just have one draft class where you suck ass. You got to have multiple, right? So we'll see. The Pittsburgh Steelers are still searching. They have completed an interview with Mike McCarthy. I'm sure that inspires many Steelers fans for greatness on the way. Mike McCarthy and Matt Nagy. Yeah, man. If I was you, I'd... Jesus. It is... Sorry, I had to drink after saying Mike McCarthy and Matt Nagy in like legitimate conversation for the head coaching position. It's absolutely insane that both of those guys are in the mix. They were targeting Brian Flores, but he signed an extension with the Vikings. Maybe Steelers trade for a head coach. I'm just going to be honest, it'd be worth it. It'd be worth it to trade for a head coach instead of having to hire Mike McCarthy and Matt Nagy. So, and then having to keep them because of, like, you know, the thing. Like, it's become a thing now where they're just like, oh, man, they just don't fire head coaches. They give them a chance. And I'm like, what are they going to do? Like, you can't stumble into a good football team. And neither Mike McCarthy or Matt Nagy have proven that they're consistently good enough to be able to stumble or be able to build a good football team overall. Anyway, Mike McCarthy's really good at smoozing with rich people, obviously, a la Jerry Jones. Notable, by the way, this is like it's tied for the most head coaching changes in NFL history as of right now, with 10 spots being open. So 10 out of the 32 head coaching spots are open. It's kind of crazy. Other stuff going on. Sam Darnold still has an oblique injury, which is an abdominal muscle, but he says he going to limit throwing throughout the week so he can be ready for game day. And then the John Lynch, who's the general manager for the San Francisco 49ers, says that Brandon Ayuk is out of here. Done as a 49er. If you guys don't remember, Brandon Ayuk held out for a good chunk of time until he got his extension 2 years ago. Now, 2 seasons ago, I will say. He held out for his extension. He got his extension, and then about 5 weeks into the season, I can't remember what team that they were playing. Somebody launched their helmet into his straightened out knee, and it tore like multiple ligaments in his knee. There's been an argument between how the organization and how the player should handle it. He's kind of stepped away from being in a position where he stepped away from team treatment, and then once he started doing that, it opens up, like, honestly, man, I'd be interested to see how that works. If you're unfamiliar with how the NFL works, like when it comes to stuff like that, where you stop doing the team's treatment for what they think you should be doing to heal your knee to be ready to play, they start looking at ways to get their money back, because if you need to be in rehab and you're like, I'm not going to go to team treatment, I'm just going to sit at home and wait for it to heal up. That's not how it works, especially when you're a pro athlete. So your refusal to go to treatment is a way it opens up a pathway for them to legally go after the money that they claim that they were going to pay you in your guaranteed contract. And Brandon Ayuk, obviously, they can't cut him, or they're going to still have to pay him a bunch of money and stuff like that. But it was kind of shocking that there was even a chance that people thought he was going to be able to come back this season. Despite, I think he tore like 3 ligaments in his knee at once. So, and it was all because like somebody else. It wasn't like him being like ill prepared or bad conditioning or something like that. Like a safety from the Cardinals like dove into his knee for a tackle, and it just tore everything. It was kind of crazy. Anyway, moving on, Texans news. The offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, is expected to return. Me personally, I tell people this all the time, and I argue this all the time, and I think my prime example of this is Jalen Hurts. Continuity is important. You can talk about how you don't like the play calls that are being made. You don't think that it's creative enough. there is immense value in showing up to your job and knowing when somebody calls something in the headset, you don't even have to, like, to make it second nature for your ability to be able to run that play, right? That kind of continuity allows you to get to the deeper levels of certain stuff, especially because it gets you more confidence with the offensive coordinator, and you put yourself in a better position to modify the play that's been called and make it a successful play based off what you see. You can talk about how you don't like Nick Caley's offense. It did feel like towards the back end of the season, CJ Stroud kind of got a better grip on it. I think it's also important knowing that, like, CJ Stroud is a third-year quarterback in the NFL, to not have him be on his third offensive coordinator, which is what we've seen from Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts has had more offensive coordinators than he has had years in the NFL, which is a testament to what happens when you're a highly competitive team at all times. Everybody wants a little bit of the sauce. And it's also an example of, like, clearly Nick Sirianni is a massive part of what the offensive aspect of the game goes with. But I find this to be good news. Not only because this upcoming year is an important year. I think the Texans have already claimed his fifth-year option, like, at the end of last season or something like that, just because, like, you're a rookie quarterback and you had the best rookie quarterback season ever. You need to see what's going to happen in year 5. Success and progress are not linear. That is one thing that a lot of sports fans fail to understand. Like, you just don't get better on, like, a constant trajectory forward. You take steps back, you take steps sideways, and you get better. Like, that's how life works. And a lot of people tend to forget that because they think it's cool for, they think everything's a fucking Marvel superhero movie. That's not how it works. You got to take steps back before you can take steps forward. That's called development. Everybody's always talking about, like, developing players, developing this. That is development. Being there when things are bad and being there when things are good. The Texans uncertain on Joe Mixon's future after the missed season. Joe Mixon, who's the starting and clear-cut number one running back for the Houston Texans last season, was a massive part of why the offense was successful. It took a lot of pressure off CJ Stroud having to go out there and make the exact perfect play when he passes the ball, because we had a lot of situations where Joe Mixon was averaging like 4 yards a carry. Freak accident happens during the offseason, and then apparently he's having, like, mixed thoughts about, like, going to treatment from the team. That is one of the biggest problems overall for the Houston Texans, and the run game suffered. Woody Marks was really nice to find out that we have a guy who's a starting caliber running back in the NFL, and I think everybody in the city, they can sit here and say Woody Marks played really well for his rookie season, but they want more. Like, they want more people in the mix. They want more than one running back that they can count on, and they need it to happen ASAP because the window is wide open. 3 years in a row, the Texans have gone to the playoffs. They have won the division they've won the division every year except one where CJ Stroud was on the team. And there's just so much to be said and so much to be done about, like, improving this team, having a top 5 defense with a guy who seemed like he was potentially knocking on the door of being a top 5 QB, and having that rare window where everything is open, because a lot of the defense isn't just like a bunch of veteran players. Danielle Hunter is a veteran player on the Houston Texans, but he is an aberration, an outlier in terms of the talent we're talking about. Like Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, Will Anderson Jr. You talk about Henry To'oTo'o. All those guys are really young and in the mix for why the Texans defense has been so spectacular, man. And as of now, the team is in flux. It feels like everything's kind of up in the air in terms of what could happen. It could go left or it could go right. We'll see. Moving on, we will talk about what happened in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, and then we will talk about what I think is going to happen in the conference championship. So, got to move my chair here for a second. Don't have a big butt, got a wide butt. Chairs are a little narrow. Bar chairs are a little narrow. Take a little sip here. So, honestly, guys, like I said before, no notes, just vibes. I've watched every game of the NFL playoffs twice already, and my thoughts, I feel like, are pretty solidified. So we'll start with the easy one. The Seahawks played the 49ers. Did you guys know that the Seahawks are way better than the San Francisco 49ers? I knew that going into the game. I just was not looking forward to potentially playing. I was not looking forward to potentially playing the San Francisco 49ers because you never know what's going to happen when you play a team for the third time in the course of an NFL season. I think any team would have to say that, like, if the Texans ended up playing the Jaguars in the AFC Championship game, I would still be freaked out just because there's a massive benefit to having a familiarity with the team, especially when you are what I perceive to be the inferior team. Anyway, the 49ers got dismantled in this one. If you didn't know, the reason is because basically every week since like week 2, the 49ers have lost a key player on defense or on offense throughout the course of the season. And, you know, they haven't had Brock Purdy vast majority of this year. They had Mac Jones, who, by the way, you know, everybody's talking about Malik Willis because towards the back end of the season, he really carried for the Green Bay Packers. But the fact of the matter is Mac Jones has probably was the best looking backup in the NFL this past season for the 49ers. And a lot of people, I think, take credit away from him because of how good Kyle Shanahan is at his job, because he's done this before, many times before, in terms of like CJ Beathard and a bunch of other players, right? So Mac Jones does his thing vast majority of the season. People don't get a good look at Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy comes out there. He's kind of firing on the back half of the season, right? But then, you know, losing George Kittle happens. He tears his Achilles, and George Kittle is always trying to overcome some massively fucking painful injury throughout the course of every single season that he plays. I hope he comes back for another year so he can try and finish it off 100% healthy and stuff like that, because the 49ers would probably be in the mix for, you know, they would probably be in the mix for a Super Bowl or being a competitor for winning if they have their team 100% healthy. And this year, the only person they had 100% healthy, ironically enough, Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, who, by the way, is apparently a finalist for the MVP in the NFL. I would have never thought, like, you know, talk about, I guess, maybe around like week 8, you know, like almost the halfway, week 10 even, I would have never thought you see the MVP finalist and Jonathan Taylor's name wouldn't be in the mix. And that's the world that we live in. The Seahawks destroyed the San Francisco 49ers 41-6. It wasn't even it was not competitive at any given point throughout the course of this game, just so we're clear, which is kind of how you would expect the third time to go against an opponent, where you're just kind of like, hey man, at this point it just comes down to like who can beat who, right? It comes down to like our guy's better than your guy. The only time the 49ers were even competitive with the Seahawks was probably in week 2 when Nick Bosa got that interception and they won by 1 point. That was the closest they've come to being competitive. And if I'm not mistaken, the next week Nick Bosa tore his Achilles and he was out for the rest of the season. So, yeah, that's something. That's something. The 49ers vastly overachieved, easily the most overachieving team in the playoffs this year, even though the NFC West was an absolute butchering. It was, I mean, a butcher's house? Slaughterhouse. There we go. It was an absolute slaughterhouse. And they were still able to go out there and really ball out of control, man. That is why Robert Saleh is the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. That is why Kyle Shanahan, regardless of what you say about results, is one of the best coaches in the NFL. It's not even up for debate at this point. It is just how it is. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best, and he very well may make it to the NFL Hall of Fame without winning a Super Bowl, because I feel like he's proven time and time again, just off the sheer number of wins he's able to get under the circumstances that he finds himself in so often, that he's a winner. I don't really have any like technical stuff to say about this. The defense for the Seattle Seahawks was absolutely astounding. They are, and I've seen a bunch of film breakdowns of like why the Seahawks defense is so effective. Mike Macdonald is a great hire for the Seattle Seahawks, and quite frankly, is a prime example of why you should hire the opposite direction of where your previous coach is from. Pete Carroll, one of the better offensive guys in the game. You know what I mean? And then they hire Mike McDonald, defensive coordinator for the Ravens, and it blends the two groups of players together ever so perfectly. Sam Darnold, obviously, is the biggest question coming into this. He's not only hurt coming in and playing in this game, but on top of that, Zach Charbonnet is now out. I've been a big proponent, and if you listen to this pod before, I've been saying it for a long time. I don't understand the draw for Mike McDonald to Zach Charbonnet. And I know there's people like he's a better pass blocker, all this kind of stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, man, but he's just the more explosive. Like Kenneth Walker is just the more explosive running back. Like there's not even a question of like who's the more complete player. It's Kenneth Walker. And if your offense is so predicated on a running back being able to pass block so well, maybe you need a different offense. But the offense they've been running is working pretty good so far. They've already had the Pro Football Writers of America Association has already come out and revealed that JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, is in fact their offensive player of the year, which, whatever. I was going to have a conversation about how the MVP award has become a quarterback-only award with Christian McCaffrey in the mix, but like we all know that Christian McCaffrey is not going to win it because they're more than likely going to give it to Matthew Stafford. I don't know why they're waiting so long because there's a real chance that they end up having to give the award to Matthew Stafford a week after he lost. It's the NFL Honors Awards is like the week after the championship games, right? So the first week is super weeks leading up to the Super Bowl. But Matthew Stafford could very well either be going to the Super Bowl or completely eliminated, and in embarrassing fashion, because I feel like that is going to happen in this game. There is the next round of the playoffs, the NFC Championship game, is the Seahawks versus the Rams, something that I feel like a lot of people were thinking was really on the table, and like I said before, I thought it was on the table as well, because I picked the Packers to play the Ravens in the Super Bowl, but I also said I definitely feel like if there's ever an alternative, it's going to be the Rams versus the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game, and I'm cool with that either way because I'm a Seahawks fan, obviously. But I wasn't surprised how much they dismantled the 49ers, and I'm going to move on from this game because it actually was the least entertaining game out of all the games that happened in the divisional round. The Rams played the Chicago Bears, and they played them in bear weather, as they tried to say that it was. Anyway, the Bears played the Rams. The Bears won their division, so they were actually the higher seed in this one, despite the Rams clearly being the better team. That is a debate for another day. Whatever. The Bears won their division. The Rams did not. That's what happens. That's reality. That's the world that we live in. Moving on. The Rams looked like the Rams were on the ropes vast majority of this game. We saw the previous weekend, the wild card weekend, that the Bears once again did the thing that they've been doing all season, where they kind of hung around towards the end of the game, and then when the end of the game happens, they just so happen to make the 7 plays that they need to be able to win. And not a lot of teams in the NFL can say that. Like the Bears, up until this week, would have been, if you're going to rate and rank all the teams that played in the divisional round of the playoffs, right, and you're ranking them by clutch rating, you would say maybe the Bills are number 1 because you have more faith in Josh Allen, but it would be definitively the Bears are number 1 or number 2, and it's not even close, right? There's been so many instances where the Bears, it just comes off like it's their style of play due to their situation with their defense, which doesn't get like a ton of stops. A lot of people have pointed out how there's a big emphasis on how the Bears defense needs to generate turnovers to be successful. I think it's more about just getting raw stops up front because that's the great indicator of a great defense. Anyway, Rams, Bears, when it was all said and done, Caleb Williams had a couple of key plays, including one of the best throws in like NFL playoff history to Cole Kmet in the back of the end zone to take the lead, and then they go into overtime, and it kind of I'm going to be honest with you, everything leading up to overtime was super dope. Overtime was so whack. The instant turnover for the Bears on their initial drive felt very much like how the Jaguars got intercepted in the first round versus the Bills, and it just ended the game when it was all said and done. But yeah, this game, a lot of it I'm gonna be honest with you. The last 3 or 4 weeks, the last month of the season, the Bears defense has really stepped up and gone to like a level that I don't think a lot of us thought they were actually capable of. Like versus the Packers, they played the best half of defense they have played all season, and that is saying a lot because the Bears have been in a lot of do or die situations, and they come up with do every single time instead of the die. And this is the first time we've seen all season where they've come up with a die when it was all said and done. But to hold the Rams offense, which was one of the best in the league, one of the best in the NFL, to just 20 points. And remember, it was 17-17 because the 3 points to get to 20 came off the game-winning field goal. It was astounding to see what they've been capable of throughout the course of this year. And it sucks because you feel like you have the momentum to be able to take it on to the next level, to be able to be the team that makes the miraculous run to the Super Bowl like we saw the Bears do with Rex Grossman. You feel like if you don't finish it out, the next season, you're not going to carry the momentum over. And I feel like me personally as a fan, as a person who's watched all the games, a person who talks on this podcast, it's hard for me to just be like, yep, it's all linear. They're just going to keep getting better. They're just going to keep getting better. And then all of a sudden, they're going to be Super Bowl champions. We've seen this so many times where like a team has like a massive upturn in success in one singular year, and then they get a bunch of injuries the following season, and they can't follow up on the success that they had before, plus the fact that the Bears have terrible draft picks, right? Like they have bad draft picks because of how far they made it in the playoffs. And they still have like some pretty obvious stuff that they got to work on. Like defensively, they have a lot of improvements to make in terms of like player personnel, and then of course approach as well. A lot of those adjustments are going to be on the defensive line. We already saw what they look like, what they could look like when given time. There was some action. A vast majority of this game was the defensive line for the Bears finally showing up for like the 5th time all season, right? And the Rams being able to work their way up and down the field, not because of the Bears defense being bad, but because Matthew Stafford just diming people up in the cold, by the way, because apparently he has like a terrible record in the cold. Don't forget when he was in Detroit, he played in the dome the entire time, so that kind of doesn't count. But yeah, man, it was a ton of fun to watch despite the score being so low. But Rams win, Bears lose. Rams advance onto the NFC Championship game, which I think is something that people have been saying is going to happen since about like week 7 or 8 of the season, and they will face off against the Seattle Seahawks. We'll talk about that a little bit later when I finish talking about these divisional rounds. Moving on, those are 2 NFC games. Let's take it from the top in the AFC. The Bills played the Broncos in one of the most exciting and probably saddest games of the NFL playoffs so far. The Bills come up short. And if we're looking at narratives and stories that are told about each one of these teams, the Buffalo Bills were a team that a lot of people were thinking like this is their year. This is the story's been told many times before, but I'll tell it for the people who don't know it, who have not been paying attention. The Buffalo Bills have been a team that's been on a slow uptick for about 6 years now. They have seen and survive the reign of Tom Brady in their division, because your division champion is typically an indicator of like you're a really good football team, you're going to go far in the playoffs. They have had their battles, and it has become some of the most clutch games. Like honestly, the battles between Josh Allen's Bills and Patrick Mahomes' Kansas City Chiefs are going to be like generational defining stuff. Like those are going to be the things that guys who are going to be guys and gals who are going to be 25, 30 in about 10 years, 15 years. They're going to talk about those being the pivotal marks and times to the younger people who are watching football just now. And they've always come up short on the short end of every single one of their engagements when it comes to make that pivotal moment to becoming, real championship contenders. Every single time they've found themselves facing off against Patrick Mahomes, and they've been turned away. This season, Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL and was easily on one of the worst football teams he's ever. He was on probably the worst football team he's been on in his time in the NFL, and that's saying a lot. A lot of that is due to like how much success he generates for the Chiefs overall, but vast majority of that has a lot to do with the degradation of the team due to draft picks over time, which is obviously a product of the success of the squad. But going back to what I was talking about with the Bills, this was like their time. every single one of these quarterbacks, the biggest competition, like you look at the divisional round, Josh Allen is the second most experienced, second most tenured quarterback that was competing in the divisional round, only behind Matthew Stafford. And I think a lot of people will say, like, he's got the experience, he's got the skill, he's got the team that's been around for long enough, and they understand what it's like to play in these high leverage, high pressure situations in games and stuff like that. And they just couldn't get it done against the guy who I think everybody would look, man. You rank the quarterbacks that are in the playoffs right now in the divisional round, just the divisional round, because I think if you made it the wild card round, he'd still be towards the bottom, because the way CJ Stroud has shown higher peaks than Bo Nix has in his NFL career. Like, CJ Stroud, once again, best rookie season an NFL quarterback has ever had, and Bo Nix has shown like nothing, essentially, right? He's had a handful of extremely good games. There is nothing about Bo Nix that makes you think that guy is the reason that his team is successful. Even people could argue, like you talk about, if any of the other quarterbacks that are in the playoffs, even some of the quarterbacks that didn't make the playoffs were on the Broncos would be an absolute juggernaut. And this is no diss to Bo Nix, because I think some of it has to do with experience. Some of it has to do with the difficulty of running Sean Payton's offense. Some of this has to do with the talent situation that he's dealing with a little bit. And then obviously some of it's on him. He could be better. You know what I mean? Like, it's not his fault. He's a second-year quarterback in the NFL, but I still would think that he'd be second to last or last if you rank the quarterbacks, and the only guy worse than him would probably be CJ Stroud, based off of how he's played this season. And then, of course, obviously I'm heavily biased because I already know what happened in the Texans Patriots game, but nonetheless, there is nothing about the Broncos other than like the Broncos defense is the tip of their spear, right? And the sharp parts on the edges are the running backs. Like, it's RJ Harvey, and it was J.K. Dobbins until he had like a season-ending injury. But this was a massive disappointment. And the response after they lost this game, I felt was appropriate. They fired their head coach, which is a bummer because Sean McDermott I don't think is the problem. But nonetheless, it starts from the top down, right? They always say that. And they're not going to get rid of Josh Allen. They're going to get rid of Sean McDermott and see if they can find somebody else to work it with. But yeah, man, this game is, I wouldn't even say it's similar to the shit that happened with the Bills before Josh Allen. Like, in terms of, like, hey, man, 4 field goals, right? Like, 4 missed the four Falls of Buffalo documentary. This is just flat out Josh Allen and the Bills' success has drained them of their ability to put together a ridiculously good team without spending a ton of money, without overspending. And even the guys they overspent on, like Joey Bosa, didn't come in and turn out to be game-changing players. Like, Joey Bosa was much better on the Chargers, and obviously because he had Khalil Mack on the opposite side. The defensive line has been better in years. Matt Milano was one of the best linebackers in the NFL before he broke his leg. The secondary, I wouldn't even say actually performed all that poorly. It came down, like, Tre'Davious White lost his shit at the end of that game, but prior to that, he was cooking, bro. It was just, it's impossible to be in a playoff game and overcome 5 turnovers in a playoff game. Regardless of how good the other guy is on the other side, you're going to lose that game. And maybe it did take them all the way to overtime, and it did take an absolutely highly questionable but insanely well-played McMillan interception off of a Brandon Cooks catch. By the way, you have to wonder why you as an organization, why you as a team are having to hang your hat on, in terms of wide receiver. You know, they had Khalil Shakir, who's been massive for them throughout the course of this entire season, the number one wide receiver throughout the course of this season. But Brandon Cooks is like the guy who's taking over in the back half of this game. And I'm not to sit here and say Brandon Cooks sucks at football. He doesn't. Brandon Cooks is a ridiculously good wide receiver. He was really good when he was with the Saints. He was really good when he was with the Texans, and when he was with the Patriots as well. But he joined the team like 6 weeks ago, bro. But yeah, man, it's massively disappointing. Josh Allen was crying at the press conference after the game was over. The team was crying in the locker room, obviously, for not only for the loss, but knowing what it does to the people that they care about. Like they knew Sean McDermott was going to be fired. Pegula, who, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to be like legit honest with you. I saw the comments that Terry Pegula made yesterday about Keon Coleman. If you didn't, they were asking about the wide receiver situation in the exit interview for Brandon Beane, who has somehow gotten promoted to president of football or president of operations for the Buffalo Bills. And I think that also it so much of that reeks of the stuff that we saw with the guys who drafted like Andrew Luck, in terms of Chris Ballard. A lot of it reeks of the stuff that we saw with any person that was in connection with the Colts when they got Peyton Manning, right? Assuming that they're like some kind of tactical mastermind or genius because they were able to sort out a diamond in the rough that became a superstar for the team, right? And not have a ton of other evidence that pans out in that same direction. But Terry Pegula in the exit interview cut off Brandon Beane to answer a question about the wide receiver depth for the Bills, which is always this is one of their biggest glaring issues, right? They don't have like two top tier wide receivers. They don't have one top tier wide receiver, right? They don't have a guy that you would typically like. Khalil Shakir 2 years ago was a special teams superstar for the Buffalo Bills, and now he's like the number one guy. And obviously there's a difference between being the number one guy because you're absolutely amazing in terms of skill and the number one guy because we ain't got nobody else. And I'm not saying maybe Khalil Shakir is somewhere in between that, because clearly when he gets the ball in his hand, he makes plays, right? A lot of those plays are close to the line of scrimmage, but he makes plays. Terry Pegula cuts off Brandon Beane and says that the wide receiver situation, he calls it the Keon Coleman issue. If you don't know, Keon Coleman is a second-year wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. And he says that he says that Keon Coleman was Sean McDermott and the previous coaching staff's idea, and that Brandon Beane has been being quiet about it to not try to disrespect the coaches or blame the coaches and stuff like that. And he should be applauded for that. And I, like I do with many rich people, I say, fuck you, dude. I say, fuck you, dude. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Like, Keon Coleman is a young man whose path and story is not even close to being done told. And somebody has already told you who he is and what he is, right? And they've already made their mind up about it. And obviously, if you're Keon Coleman and you're a family member of his, you're probably telling him like, hey man, you need to request a trade, because you can't succeed around people who wish for your failure. And it comes off like Terry Pegula, who's the owner of the Buffalo Bills, wishes for the failure of Keon Coleman so that he can be proven right, because he's already blamed him for all the issues. And I can't imagine being so stupid as a non-football person to think that, hey, you know what? The last 6 years, you know who the problem is at the wide receiver position? The last 6 years that we have Josh Allen, it's 100% the guy who just got here. So, moving on. The Bills, honestly, man, the 5 turnovers are just fucking insane. The loose carrying of the ball that led to a fumble, the interceptions, all that kind of stuff like that. It is, Josh Allen and the Bills kept this game close because he was able to go out there and make amazing plays that almost overrode how good they, almost overrode how bad the turnovers were. The other thing that I have to point out about this, and when it got to overtime, it came down to Bo Nix. It came down to Bo Nix making plays happen. And I've never been a person that takes this away from him. Like I said before, Bo Nix plays really well, like 3 drives a game. 3 drives a game, he's amazing. And it just so happened one of his 3 drives happened in overtime that led to a field goal, but apparently also led to him breaking his ankle because he's now out for the rest of the playoffs. And they are going with Jarrett Stidham. If you don't know who Jarrett Stidham is, they call him Mr. Friday Night Lights. He's from Stevensville, Texas. And that's all I'm going to really say about him. Anyway, Apparently, Sean Payton has a massive amount of faith in Jarrett Stidham's ability to get or even succeed the results they've gotten out of Bo Nix, which we've already talked about, not that high. So yeah, moving on. Let's talk about the other AFC game here, man. And as you guys know, I'm a Texans fan. I'm not going to sit here and try and sugarcoat this. There's no way you win a football game with an offense that bad, turning the ball over that many times. That just doesn't happen. That's not how football works. That's not how the game goes, as I like to say. CJ Stroud. So I'll point this out after I take this little sip right here. Sorry about that. I'll point this out. Going into the game, let's take it back to the start of the season. Start of the season, Nick Caserio and the organization up front decided they were going to move on from a lot of the offensive line talent. In particular, Laremy Tunsil. And for whatever you have to say about Laremy Tunsil in his false starts, Laremy Tunsil still was one of the best left tackles in all of football. Laremy Tunsil leaving meant that a lot of younger offensive linemen that were on the team, a lot of guys that have been developing over the last couple of years, had to step up. If you were wondering why we started 0-3 and they kind of put a nail in our coffin as a team early on, it's because of the offensive line play. A lot of teams who play got a lot of pressure, right? Texans play a tough schedule because they finished in first place in the AFC South last year, which means they played every first place team in the AFC the following year, plus a really tough divisional matchup, plus a really tough cross-divisional matchup. But anyway, yeah, offensive line has been a huge issue all season, and it has been overridden and kind of erased because they started to play a little bit better towards the back half of the season. We talked about this when we talked about the Chargers early in the year, about how you can talk about you have bad offensive line, you have bad pass blocking, bad run blocking, or below average run blocking. But the fact of the matter is, the more time that those guys spend together, the better they are going to play as a unit. And one of the skills that offensive linemen have is the ability to adjust to one another. Is why offensive linemen are great teammates, because vast majority of their job is being able to manufacture chemistry when they don't necessarily have it. Right? When they're not necessarily sure. Chemistry is the number one piece of emphasis. So that is like a real thing that happened with the Texans throughout the course of the season. The back half of the season, because you started to see more points get on the board. If you watched how the points got on the board, a lot of it was because of the turnovers, putting the offense like on the doorstep of the end zone vast majority of the time, and the offense still looking very bad. So they go against the Patriots. The Patriots come into this one. They're one of the better defenses in the NFL. They do a really good job of generating pressure. They do a really good job of covering deep downfield. Christian Gonzalez, very talented, immensely talented defensive back. Plus, the Texans are down their right tackle. The Texans also, in the course of this game, lose their backup right tackle. And then coming into this one, Nico Collins is out due to a concussion and not eligible to play in this game. And we expected to win. Don't know how, what reality or what world that was in. Woody Marks gets hurt because he's had a bad ankle all season. Have to wonder what type of surgery he's going to be needing to get back on track, because he's been hurt since like week 5. And that's pretty much what did it in. The pressure, the offensive line not only had multiple replacements throughout the course of the game, but it was already down to like their second string guys to start the game off with. So you combine that, you get terrible results at the quarterback position, and then we end up having all these people making fun of CJ Stroud and saying that he sucks and all this kind of stuff like that. 99% of quarterbacks in the NFL, we talk about this with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott, when he is under pressure, becomes one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So to expect a third-year NFL quarterback in CJ Stroud to be able to overcome having a third-string right tackle and I believe a second-string right guard and a second-string left guard to be able to be successful is absurd. It's just not going to happen, especially against a good team. I've always thought the Patriots at the bare minimum were a good team. Do I question whether or not they're an elite team? Of course. They are one win away from going to the Super Bowl, so it would be absurd for me to question if they were an elite team. They are balanced. The defense for the Texans kept them in this game. This score is the most deceptive score of the entire weekend. It was, in my heart, in my mind, I'm going to be honest with y'all, I told a lot earlier in this podcast. I told you that I watched every single playoff game twice. I watched Texans Patriots 1.5 times. So the half was at halftime. I went and took a nap for the second half of this game. And I'm dead fucking serious when I say this. I knew what happened when I woke up. When I woke up, my girlfriend was like, "Oh, Ashton, I'm so sorry. I have bad news." I was like, "It's not news to me." Look, as a shitty offensive lineman myself in college, I know what happens when you can't block anybody. So yeah, to me, it was real simple. I took a nap at halftime, and then I went back and I rewatched the entirety of this game on a replay, on the condensed version. It was tough, but I did it for you, the people I love the most, random stranger on the internet. So yeah, man, like I said, I took a nap at halftime, and it was quite honestly a really good decision for me because it kept me awake for Bills Broncos. And then I watched a couple of TV shows that I've been meaning to watch with my girlfriend, and it didn't hurt as bad. It did. I'm not even lying, bro. Like, it hurt. It hurt bad, regardless if I had watched it or not, because there was a lot of times where, they kind of made you think that you were close, and quite frankly, there was no point that they were. Just facts. Anyway, the Patriots essentially plowed through the Texans. The Texans defense went crazy on them. People were talking about Drake May turning the ball over a bunch, which is really funny because Drake May, once again, if you're talking about like a Egyptian scale of like your life in this hand and your feather on this one, the good plays for Drake May are like literally off the screen, and the bad plays are like slightly below average. But yeah, they're going up against a problem. Fortunately for the Patriots, they have this one thing that tends to really fuck up the Broncos, and that's balance. So there's a backup quarterback playing for a backup quarterback, which adds an air of mystery around the game, which I'm sure the league is super happy about. Because quite frankly, if I saw Bo Nix was the starting QB, I'd say that this shit was a wrap. I wouldn't even think that the last second Denver Broncos magic shit would happen, just because they've played so poorly all season, and their defense is just so good that it puts them in positions to succeed. They do have playmakers at the wide receiver position, which reduces the amount of stress on the quarterback. They're really good at running the ball. Their offensive line is spectacular. They do not have a chance in this game because I'm picking the Patriots, and it's actually not even close for me personally. I expect this to be a blowout. Jarrett Stidham playing his first really good NFL game in the AFC Championship game would be shocking, because it would be probably one of the wildest things I've ever seen. I will keep my fingers crossed for it because, as always, folks, we root for chaos. But I do think the Patriots are going back to the Super Bowl, which is going to trigger some flashbacks for a lot of people. It's really gonna hurt some people. Just in general, I think most of those people will be Buffalo Bills fans, because that will mean that the Patriots have had their dynasty fall apart, rebuilt it, and then gotten back to the Super Bowl before they've even touched winning the AFC Championship game to get to the Super Bowl to lose. Moving on, the NFC Championship game. This game is going to be fun. This is the game of the week, ladies and gentlemen, here, because it's definitely a coin flip as to who's going to win. We know Sam Darnold is hurt. We also know Kenneth Walker is the starting running back, and the guy, I'm assuming it's George Halai, who, by the way, the only reason I know his name, and I'll give a shout out to this guy. He told me he subscribed. I don't know if he did, but I met George Halai's like best friend, or like one of his really good friends from high school. And then the next day I had like another subscriber on this channel, and he called me his Uso, which, if you know, Uso means brother. So but yeah, he told me his boy is like one of the running backs for the Seattle Seahawks, and it was George Halai. So hopefully he balls out of control, but most likely will come down to Kenneth Walker. I am interested to see the trenches. The trenches is going to be the determining factor here. The Seattle Seahawks defense is just ridiculous in terms of, like I said before, they move as a hive mind, which is the idea that they have one mind that is operating multiple bodies at one time. And if you watch the film, it looks like that every single time. And every time the Seahawks and the Rams have played each other this season, it has been fireworks, ladies and gentlemen. But the second time this season that the Seahawks will have to play an opponent for the third time, which I think in the history of the NFL, there's probably only been like 2 teams who have ever had to play divisional opponents in the playoffs twice. Because up until the expansion of the playoffs, there'd only been I think it's less than 30 times that a team has played their divisional opponent a third time. Because of how if there's a wild card, because there's more wild card spots, right? So there's a greater chance that you end up playing another division's third, or your division's third place team than there ever has been. And that's why the AFC North had 3 teams in a couple of years ago. And the NFC West is the team this year with the 49ers, the Rams, and the Seahawks. So I would love to see the numbers on how many teams have faced their divisional opponents twice in the playoffs. Because the only teams that the Seahawks have played in the playoffs so far are teams that they have already played 2 times prior to this, which is crazy. But yeah, man, I have faith in the Seahawks defense to go out here and pull this one out. I just know that this shit is going to be lit because they're playing in Seattle, so it's going to be cold as fuck. I'm just facts. The Rams are obviously a run-based team that has a really good quarterback and one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but it does come down to Kyren Williams and it does come down to Blake Corum's ability to get pushed up the middle. Like I said before, it's going to come down to what happens on the line of scrimmage. I have a lot more faith in the Seahawks D-line and offensive line than I do in the Rams offensive and D-line. For something has happened the last month and a half of the season. The D-line was on fire vast majority of this year, but the last month and a half, they've just been non-existent. That was part of the reason why the Bears were so competitive with the Rams in this game. They were not getting pressure on Caleb. They were getting to him at certain times, but obviously Caleb was one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, which is crazy to say. A year ago when it seemed like he got I think he got sacked the third most times in the NFL last season or whatever, but he is a prime example of the pressure just wasn't getting home and they got bad results out of it. So and that's what kept this game close against a Bears team that defensively should not be on the same par as their offense. And obviously the weather affected them as well too. So I'm very interested to see how this shakes out, but obviously I'm still I believe analytically that the Seahawks are going to win this, and I believe as a fan the Seahawks are going to get this dub. It is going to be exciting. If there was one out of the 2 games you cannot miss, it is Rams Seahawks. You have to watch that game. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to fucking finish my podcast and get out of here. I've been at this this is my uncle's man cave, like I mentioned before, and we're going to be filming from here from now on. And the backdrop is amazing. There's a couple of other angles that I'm working on. Like I said before, slightly off to the corner over here, there's an O.J. Simpson jersey, and I need to figure out how to move that one off camera so that I can. There's an O.J. Simpson jersey and an Earl Campbell jersey right next to each other, and I just want to swap them so I can have the angle where the bar aspect of this place is behind it, because I kind of thought we would look like we were in an office building or whatever. But I'm out here. I'm doing it. We're back in. We're locked in. We got the Super Bowl coming up, and then after that, we're going to continue to talk about sports. This is a sports podcast, but I've been watching Unrivaled. I can't wait to continue to watch the NBA season because my Houston Rockets kind of turning up a little bit, whatever. But I can't wait to finally just solely focus on basketball. That is my primary sport. If you follow me on Instagram at the Ashton Forever, you'll know that because I post my mid-ass basketball clips every single week just for the people, for you, the viewer. Shout out to everybody who watches this episode after the comeback. Shout out to Snowman, who's no longer with me, with us, and I miss you, bro. Only thing left to say is be nice to people. Drink your water. I'm on a honestly, up until last Saturday, I had a 3-month streak of drinking 10 cups of water a day. because I've been using this giant ass water bottle. This is my second refill, by the way. So, been doing that, and you know, haven't noticed any differences because I drank a bunch of water before, but I got more meticulous about how much water I drink. And on that note, go out there, do your thing, be free, fight for freedom. Tell the people you love that you love them. And I'm now, at this point, I'm just rambling. I'm out of here. Later, everybody. Go home, Roger.